So, a little bit of background before we get to the build video, a little bit explaining about what Operation Jericho is about and why this series of builds took place. So, Operation Jericho, formerly known as Ramrod 546, it was only known as Operation Jericho after World War II, took place on the 18th of February 1944. This was the Allied bombing of Amiens Prison in German-occupied France at very low altitude to blow holes in the prison walls, kill German guards, and use the shockwaves to spring open the cell doors. The French resistance had been involved in the planning and were waiting outside to rescue the prisoners and spirit them away. On that morning, Mosquito fighter bombers flying low level over the wintry French countryside, breached the walls of the prison buildings, destroyed the guards' barracks, and of the 832 prisoners, 102 were killed by the bombing, 74 were wounded, and 258 escaped, including 79 resistance members and political prisoners. 2/3 of the escapees were recaptured. 2 Mosquitos and a Typhoon escort were shot down, and another Typhoon was lost at sea. The raid is noticeable for the precision and daring of the attack, which was filmed by a camera on one of the Mosquitos. There is a debate as to who requested the attack and whether it was necessary, but we'll keep away from that. If you look online, you can find sources and documentaries and plenty of discussion about this. The RAF 2nd Tactical Air Force Wing fielded 18 de Havilland Mosquito fighter bombers Mark 6s, 6 from number 487 Squadron, Royal New Zealand Air Force, 6 from 464 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, and 6 Mosquitos of 21 Squadron. These were to follow up the raid in case the raid failed to bomb the prison, with the goal being to kill the prisoners. So it was stated, or so the history might indicate, though some people might dispute that. A photographic reconnaissance PR Mosquito was laid on for the Royal Air Force Film Production Unit to film the raid. The raid was provisionally set for 17th of February. The Mosquitos were to arrive over the prison at noon sharp to catch the guards for lunch. And the second wave was then to bomb them. The plan was divulged to the resistance to tip them off, to tip off the underground and to arrange for the accomplices to be waiting outside. As it was, the raid took place at noon on the 18th of February. Following through in the third wave was Wing Commander Picard, and his role was to evaluate the effectiveness of the raid and to determine whether the third wave would need to go in to finish off the job or do more work. Therefore, he came in, he was circling the prison during the attack, and he was also one of the last aircraft to leave. But having seen that the attack was successful, he headed back. But unfortunately, by that time, the Luftwaffe was well and truly alerted. Now, it should be noted that because of the weather conditions, not all the Typhoons allocated for the to provide a low-level escort actually met up with the Mosquitoes, so they were rather unprotected, or less protected than they should have been. What this meant was that on the way back, Picard got bounced by an FW-190 and at low level had his tail shot off. He crashed, and him and his navigator, Flying Officer Broadley, were both killed. So a little bit now of the background and why I'm engaging in this build project. I have a colleague, Martin, at work who is involved with the Historical Society. And on the 18th of February this year, there was planned to be a memorial service, and this would be attended by historical groups, local representatives, and most notably Group Captain Picard's granddaughter and Flying Officer Broadley's niece. My colleague, who knows I'm a scale modeler, asked if I could do a special presentation piece for this. So the first build you will see is Picard's and Broadley's Mosquito, and this was then presented to Picard's granddaughter outside the prison at Amiens on the 18th of February this year. So it was very much built as a commission build. The second build was, well, this is a fascinating subject, and I just felt I had to build a second one for myself. Later in the year, there may be a third build, which might be Picard's last moments being intercepted by the FW-190, but that has yet to be confirmed. So this is a little bit background to this, that so you can understand why I built this and why I did two builds. So hopefully the next part will just be the build video itself, again with my commentary. I think this is a fascinating subject, so please take the time to look up and research the Operation Jericho, the Amiens raid, and I believe that there was a 633 Squadron film based around this as well. So this build was supposed to begin with the Airfix Mosquito as shown. It's a kit I had in my stash for a while, and I thought it would have made a good starting point. As it was, in discussing this project with other colleagues who are also scale modelers, I ended up deciding to go to the Hasegawa de Havilland Mosquito that I bought off a colleague for 15 quid. As it was, I was going to end up using the Airfix Mosquito in the second build, but I just felt for this particular case, as I was only originally intending to do one build, that the Hasegawa build Mosquito would be better, and as it was, I also ended up doing a kit bash. So there you can see the Airfix crewman and the Hasegawa nose and cockpit interior. Now I added the mountings for the to take the brass rods inside the bomb bay area of the kit. I like how the cockpit went together in two parts. I hit everything with Tamiya cockpit green and then tidied up a little bit. So the one thing I felt about the Hasegawa Mosquito is that it wasn't designed to be displayed closed up. The fit of the wheel well doors was pretty poor if you wanted them to display like that. So it did require quite a bit of work on that front. You can see there I used the exhaust from the Airfix Mosquito to reflect Group Captain's Picard aircraft. Honestly, I should have bought aftermarket resin parts, as they are a bit overly chunky for what they are. And with a bit of cleaning up and work, I think I managed to get something that looks reasonably neat and tidy, but it did require quite a bit of filling and rework to look decent, how you might say. Not the easiest of builds if you want a buttoned up Mosquito. So I next went over to undercoating. In this case, I decided to use cockpit green again. The main reason being is that it's a grey plastic, and sometimes I find that a little bit difficult to see. So by going over to the cockpit green, I created a contrast just to make it easier to see the next coats. After that, with that down, I started applying some pre-shading that would show up through the grey. Started off with the top surfaces along the flying surface lines and along the wing route and other areas that I thought would be best put in the shade. Then it was over to the lower surfaces, and there I went quite heavily around the Bombay, the and inboard of the engine fairings. Main reason for that was that with the way the model was going to be displayed, that would very much be harder to see, and so I felt it was appropriate to apply shading. I then went over for the main coat of light grey, which was Tamiya XF 20. That went on reasonably well, but as will be discovered later, I was storing up problems for myself. To get, as there's two shades of grey on this, I then thinned down the XF20 with XF2 white, because the upper surfaces were a slightly lighter shade of grey. My goal had been to overspray this on the upper surfaces, then mask off. I did a little bit of post shading on the lower surfaces, but this sort of creates the contrast that I was aiming for. As we'll soon be discovered, that all went a bit tits up, but anyway, so that's was the applied low surfaces. After that, while this was setting, I set about doing the prop discs. So using the propellers as a reference, I set about cutting circles in clear plastic. The propellers helped give me my radius. I kept the clear on the covering on to prevent the plastic from the visible surface from being damaged during the cutting process. I then cut out the areas where there would be the visible prop. I used blue tack, as you can see, to hold it there, and that meant I kept the original covering plastic as a kind of masking film for this. Then I lightly sprayed, but probably not lightly enough, the visible prop discs, and something that I should have done on this build was put in the yellow blur. I still think that these were a bit too heavy, and they would be, in my mind, too heavy in the second build. So while that was setting, I set about applying the masking ahead of applying the green, and in this case I went down my usual route of applying a blend of white tack and blue tack. Then I sprayed on the I used NATO green because to me that for this case that looked like the best shade. Could have used olive drab, but generally speaking just want that darker shade of green. That went on okay. Unfortunately, when I removed the masking, a whole chunk of paint came off. I tried blending, I tried merging, nothing worked. This was one of those great moments of frustration. So as it was, I'd left the lower surface masking on. I then cut some paper masks, resprayed the upper surfaces, well, did some blending, re-sanding, and applied the paper masks before then painting it again. So these were sort of masked up, and you can see the approach I took. I still use some of the masking tape, taking a little bit of a risk there, but you can see what it begins to look like with this new approach. And there in front of the decal set, I use the DP Casper Decals, reference 72048, for this project, for all the builds in this series, and they are an excellent set of decals. was to go over to the sorting out the mountings. I used 2.5mm brass rod that I'd got from Chester Model Centre. Used progressive, stepping up in drill sizes to drill a hole into the areas in the Bombay where I'd previously put the evergreen strips just to add some meat to it for the mounting rods to go into. And once you get one in, it becomes a lot easier to handle the model, and that sets it up for decaling. That's one advantage of doing models on display stands. Now the models, the Casper decals went on very well. They're very thin, minimum carrier film, and they sit very close to the surface. With microset and microsole, there are absolutely no issues with how these decals go on. And there you can see Picard's F for Freddy aircraft. The only issue I have with the way I did these is that I applied them a little bit too far forward, so the position does bug me a bit. But because they go on so tight, once these decals are down, they are very, very difficult to move. So you've really got to be clear about your positioning. After that, I put on the prop discs, and you're really beginning to see this coming together. I also prepped some brush bristles to make the aerials. The DP Casper decal set, the background info is excellent for your painting scheme and for information like the Mosquito variant, the background, the aerial arrangement, things like that. So if you are going to do this project in 1/72, I just cannot recommend these decals enough. And as I said, I bought them from Hannon's. So decals were then sealed down. Well, they went down on clear gloss, and then they were sealed down with clear matte. I used a couple of spare decals from the kit box to add a little bit of decorative detail on the picture frame around the edge. So an RAF roundel and two of the tail markings on a little colour scheme patch there. I just like to have that when I have picture frame displays. I'd put together the background image from images I found on the net. Then indicate using blue tack helped me to find the spots where I was going to put down the rods, and then drill through. So at that stage, when I did the drilling through, I'd replaced the glass with clear polycarbonate, and I got that just as a clear sheet, again from Chester Model Centre. It needed a little bit of trimming, and we were ready to mount the model. So here is the model on its display base. The display base was made up to, well, the background image was created to show Amiens Prison, Picard on the lower right, some info, and then Picard and Flying Officer Broadley, his navigator, on the lower left. There's Amiens Prison in the background and the names. Now, as this was going to Nicole, Picard's granddaughter, she did want to make sure that Broadley, his navigator, was mentioned as well. The brass rods are largely hidden from view, and I'd created a frame so it could easily be hung from a wall, stood up on a sideboard, so you still had the back support, or actually laid flat on a table or other surface. So how it's displayed at Nicole's home is entirely up to her, but it was very much, there's like soft pads behind this as well, and string attached so you can hang it up. And this is with the spinning prop discs, and you can see the brass rod going into the fuselage. So we'll leave this one here for now. We'll see a little bit more of it in a little while. Thank you for watching so far, but there's more to come on this project. So this conveniently leads us now to our second build. Well, we go back to the original kit that we were going to use, the Airfix de Havilland Mosquito, that I'd already started. But I wanted to do this build for myself. Because this is such a fascinating subject and the whole story around Operation Jericho, I decided to also include the new Hawker Typhoon. So this second project really has an old classic tool, FX Mosquito, and a new tool, Hawker Typhoon. So we'll begin by diving a little bit more, or going back to the Airfix Mosquito. Now this is the work I'd done back in December. You can see in the fuselage there's the white evergreen strip to take the mounting rods, the basic cockpit and the engine nacelles pre-prepared. This kit is far better if you're going to mount on a display stand and build things buttoned up. However, when I did run into problems with the bracing for the mounting rods, that it did cause the plastic to shrink on the kit itself, and I ended up with a couple of dents that needed to be filled, so I had to be a little bit careful there with the glue I used in this case. The cockpit also needed a bit of dressing up, especially aft of the seats, but it buttoned up okay. You can see there with the clamps, again painted cockpit green. There's a bit of scratch building in there as well, as it's a very, very basic cockpit in the original kit. But with all the extra bits in the interior, the wing fit was going to be a bit of an issue. But with a bit of work, and it goes together reasonably well using Humbrol putty and Mr. Surfacer as well. Because of the raised panel lines, you really want to limit the amount of sanding you have to do to avoid obliterating the detail. Though I did find myself having to also give it a spray just to make sure that I could see where the panel lines were. As I'd used up the crew in the original kit, I had to do a bit of rummaging to find another pilot figure, and then going to the Airfix old soft plastic set, I chopped one of the pilots up there, found a spare pair of legs for him, and decided to mount him. So the spare pilot became the navigator, and you can see the pilot's legs already located in the cockpit. So it was a case of taking this up to the necessary level before moving on to the Mosquito build. I mean the Hawker Typhoon build. You can see there the decal, the extra decals, or the decals I used, and the Mosquito pretty much ready for painting with the canopy masked up, as I normally do with a patchwork of masking tape, then onto the Hawker Typhoon. Now the new Hawker Typhoon kit is lovely. You get 4 sprues, finely recessed panel lines, shed load of detail. If I'm going to say any concerns about this, is that sometimes the engineering of the new Airfix kits can sometimes seem a little bit odd. They cram in a hell of a lot of detail, especially in the cockpit, but you have to be very careful how you bring it all together. That said, I thoroughly enjoyed the second build, and it was a real contrast to the Airfix build. Here the cockpit floor joins onto the wheel wells. Everything again painted cockpit green. Instrument panel decal goes on okay with a little bit of work. Radiator is a sub-assembly that joins onto your wheel wells and the cockpit detail as well. So quite a lot of pre-painting to do in this. Painted again dark cockpit green. Then with the wheel wells and the cockpit sub-assembly in place, I added some evergreen strip that would take one of the mounting rods for the display stand. You need to add a little bit more meat into this. I would say the fitting of this lower wing half is incredibly tricky. And then onto this you attach the gun bay assembly with the barrels of the 20mm cannons as I was making this buttoned up. Here are the aircraft ready for painting. The Typhoon kit I think is a little bit overly fiddly, overly engineered, and I also had to do a little bit of pre-painting to look for my seam lines on my on the Airfix Mosquito, but here they are ready for the main painting. So now onto the painting. I painted them both pretty much side by side, and after wiping both down with surgical spirit and letting that dry to ensure the paint adhered, I undercoated them with chromate green stroke cockpit green as a base, just so I could see the other colours more clearly. The two different shades of grey went on, and the Typhoon featured a light grey on the underside and the darker sea grey on the upper surfaces. So I was pretty much working in parallel for this stage of the build. I decided to go for a mix of tape and blue tack masking. The Typhoon has the identification stripes, not invasion stripes, but identification stripes on the underside of the wing. I did this by first masking off the area, painting it white, then masking off again and painting in the black stripe. I won't deny I got the proportion of black stripes slightly wrong. There's 4 of them when there should be 5, and that was just me having a bit of a brain fart moment. But with the way the model's going to be displayed, that wouldn't be overly visible. But you can see there, yeah, the ratio's a little bit off on the stripes. The rest of the features seem to have gone okay, and there was no paint lifting issues with it when the masking came off with either build. Key lesson to learn is clean the model with effectively before painting. Then onto the base. I picked a suitably wintry scene as from drone footage or drone picture, and that seemed to reflect the kind of countryside they would have been flying over on their way to Amiens. And I also added a label. At this stage, quite a lot of time was spent deciding, which positions they were going to be in and how they were going to be presented on the base. Decaling was with the same decals as before. They went on particularly well. They have, with that decal set, they have it for quite a number of aircraft, the different Mosquitos, Typhoons, and the FW190s as well. So, once again, gloss base, then seal everything up with matte and add a little bit of weathering, which is also sealed up. So from that, you could then see it now mounted up with the brass rods. In this case, the brass rods were somewhat longer, as I wanted to display the aircraft sideways on. So they required quite a bit of bending and work to get into the optimum position. I had a little bit of a label at the base, just to say what this was. And the other difference was with the prop discs, I actually cut the prop segments out in this case. So you can see the 4 segments there for the Typhoons, and the 3 segments on the props of the Mosquito. I also added the yellow blur on the tips. Again, it's too dark. Future builds that are going to have prop blur is going to be much lighter in tone. You can see there with the Typhoon, it took me a while to really decide on the position. That's why they're a bit more vertical and not so obscured by the aircraft themselves. But once it's hanging and viewed from the angle it's intended, the supporting rods are somewhat less obvious. And I very much built this out to be a wall hanging mount. The yellow leading edges of the Typhoon presented a little bit of a problem with the decals and needed a bit of work and adjustment to get them to sit properly. That came from the Airfix kit. Overall, the decaling was, for both aircraft, went down pretty well, and I'm actually slightly happier with this than I was with the previous aircraft. From reference pictures, both aircraft did appear to have whip aerials. Now, the issue here comes from me is this is the wrong mark of Typhoon. The Typhoon used in the raid had the car door canopy and the side opening doors, so I know this is the wrong sub-variant of Typhoon. Overall, I'm happy enough with this. It looks nice hanging there in the sitting room. And so now we move on to the next part. The project went on a little bit beyond this, and I'd now like to discuss what came next. On the 18th of February, to commemorate the 80th anniversary of Jericho, there was a gathering outside Amiens Prison. Here you can see a modern day view of Amiens from above. The Mosquito pilots would have seen it at a somewhat lower angle as they approached from the top of the image. Their flight path now has somewhat more buildings added to it. The memorial service was organised by a local school teacher and historian, and was a gathering outside the prison gates with groups from the local community, reenactors groups and other historical bodies. After the service there was a gathering by the graves of the fallen. What you can see here is my colleague Martin with Nicole, Group Captain Picard's daughter, and she was presented with the model that you saw being made earlier. It was an absolute honour to build this for her, and in memory of her fallen grandfather. And the last image in this is Nicole at the war graves. The piece of fabric she's holding was from the parachute that was recovered from the wreckage of her grandfather's aircraft. When it was shot down, the French resistance got to the crash site and they recovered material from the parachutes of Group Captain Picard and Flying Officer Broadley. And that's her by her grandfather's grave, and nearby was Flying Officer Broadley's grave. And I think that's the best thing to leave you guys with at this time. So thank you for watching. Take care, God bless, happy modelling, and this is Johnson North Wales signing out.